My name is Jamie Rogers. I'm the Assistant Director of Digital Collections at Florida International University, and I'm here to talk about community engagement and empowerment through environmentally focused digital humanities and how the library supports these projects at Florida International University. So first, I'd like to give you a little background about our university so that you have a deeper understanding of how and why environmental research plays such a large role in the scholarly work of our faculty and our students. FIU is a relatively large public research university located in southern Florida. As you can see, with over 55,000 students, the university also has a fairly large body of faculty and staff. You may also notice in the lower right-hand corner that this is an image of the groundbreaking ceremony in 1971. So FIU is also a fairly young institution. FIU is ranked R1 for highest research activity in the Carnegie classification system. Maintaining our classification is of high priority, with many of our research projects geared towards the environment. Responsibly as steward of the environment and as citizens of the world is one of FIU's 5 core values. This is an image of our second campus located directly off of Biscayne Bay. And this was built slightly after the initial campus. So I decided to show you a map of the location of both campuses in order to illustrate how close they both are, along with the city of Miami and its surrounding communities, to major geographical areas of environmental concern. The first being the Everglades and Big Cypress. As you can see, the large green area just to the left of the 2 campuses in the city of Miami running up the coast. And this encompasses over 2 million acres of South Florida. The environmental health of the Everglades, Big Cypress, and Biscayne Bay directly correlates to impacts on water quality, endangered species, storm surge, coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion, and sea level rise. Here's a list of departments and centers that collaborate with the library on a number of environmentally focused digital humanities and GIS projects. The Institute of Water Environment is one of FIU's preeminent programs, contributing to much of the university's environmental research. But as you can see, we also work directly with our School of Journalism and Department of History, and this is where we have this interdisciplinary connections in environmental digital humanities. The library supports undergraduate, graduate, and faculty research in digital humanities in 3 main areas. Our GIS Center provides data analysis and visualization services, including but not limited to mapping. They also develop online applications and knowledge management systems. Our Digital Collections Center provides digitized special collections as primary source materials, as well as cultivating community partnerships with museums, archives, local municipalities, and hosting their digital collections. So FIU actually hosts a number of digital collections outside of the institution. We also participate in grant writing with our community partners as well as our faculty. Recently, as October 2016, we opened the Digital Scholar Studio, in which we provide DH-focused workshops, in-class instruction, equipment lending, digital exhibit hosting, and DH software provided to students and faculty. So now I'll begin to show you a few of our environmentally focused digital humanities projects. This project was sponsored by the Humanities in the Public Square initiative of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Fragile Habitat provided an opportunity for the university to partner with local museums, cultural heritage institutions, as well as invite the public to participate and hear from nationally recognized scholars and local environmentalists as they examine challenges of climate change in culture and history. For this project, the Digital Collection Center worked with project partners to set up a virtual space to promote, capture, and archive the event activities for this initiative. This project consisted of 13 events taking place over a span of a year. Topics included diversity and environmentalism, a session titled An Emotional Lexicon for Climate Change, Wonder, Denial, Disappointment, Grief, and Hope, Healthy Women, Healthy Communities, Healthy Planet, Living with Water in an Interconnected World, Living with Nature in the African Diaspora, a lecture and community conversation at the historic Hampton House, Eco-theater workshops at Climakazi, Miami, a dialogue on culture, politics, and water in the Everglades, and creative technologies and the arts of resilience in Miami. And these are just a couple of screenshots from the website describing these events. During the 2016-2017 year, graduate student in history, Nathan Seeley, made use of the FIU-hosted Omeka platform to create a digital exhibit and online narrative. Materials from our digitized special collections and university archives were used as supporting materials for this project, as well as an illustration of his work. So this DH project focuses specifically on the South Florida community of Opa-locka. And how disadvantaged communities are often disproportionately affected by climate change through institutionalized racism in city planning, zoning, and early segregation. The Eyes on the Rise is an ongoing student project in our Department of Journalism, led by 4 faculty members, Robert Gucci, Susan Jacobson, Kate McMillan, and Juliet Pinto. There are multiple projects in this initiative, including documentaries, theater, digital exhibits, virtual reality, and sea level rise visualization. This is an example from the virtual reality project titled Virtual Eyes, where students used underwater 360-degree video capture to record the current effects of sea level rise on increased flooding in South Florida communities. And here you can see to the left is the underwater 360-degree camera they use, and then these are screenshots taken from the one of the flooded communities, or screenshots of the 360-degree capture of one of the flooded communities that they were working with. The Digital Collections Center has worked with students and this and other Eyes on the Rise projects to provide digital collections content, archiving, training on equipment and software, as well as digital exhibit hosting. Last but not least, the FIU GIS Center has collaborated with the Department of Journalism to create this sea level rise visualization application. Using elevation data and sea level rise calculations derived from LiDAR data, imagery noted by noted expert on the topic, Pete Harlem, this application allows South Florida citizens to enter an address into the system and see what the area would look like with various degrees of sea level rise. So you can see there's a search box on the left. You can just enter your address there. And then the goal of the Sea Level Rise Solution Toolbox is to inform citizens in South Florida about the potential impact of sea level rise on their neighborhoods. So as you can see, that while our inland campus could withstand sea level rise up to about 5 feet, when we go to our Biscayne Bay campus, we would begin to see impact at less than 1 foot of sea level rise. So it is our hope that by supporting projects like these, we are informing and empowering our local community to be proactive for the future. Thank you.
I'm going to present about a project called InfraVU at Vanderbilt. So infra and VU, everything at Vanderbilt is called something VU, Vanderbilt University, right? And the idea of this project is to encourage students to engage with the infrastructural basis of their increasingly magical, ephemeral educational lives, right? So this has to do with digital stuff, but it's actually a very much a pre-digital problem in the sense that I think we all know your modern college campus is constructed in a way such that students, faculty, staff actually never come into contact with either the infrastructure or the workers involved in sustaining the day-to-day life of the campus community. So an example would be at Vanderbilt, the building in which I most of the time work is directly between that building and the dining hall, there's a trash facility where tons of the campus's trash is delivered and taken by huge trucks off of campus to goodness knows where, right? But if you're walking between those two buildings, you actually, without even realizing the campus is shunting you along little curvy paths, you walk in such a way that you never see that facility. You never see the people working on that in that facility, right? Instead, your experience as an average student, as an average faculty member, of trash at Vanderbilt is entirely a very manicured and clean experience of nicely separated recycling and trash containers that magically empty of trash every so often, right? And that trash just sort of disappears from your concern, right? So what we wanted to do in this project was think about how we can help encourage students to think more about the hidden infrastructure that supports their lives, right? And the reason that has to do with digital stuff is twofold. One is because it's a digital project, as you'll see. But the other is, I think these same issues that I'm talking about here with trash, right? The same issue is multiplied in the digital situation. And so I talked about this in terms of smashability. So in our sort of digital day-to-day, we have all this magical stuff, right? Like, oh, there's a, you know, a screen up there, and I can, oh, my phone's over there. I was gonna like wave my phone around, but right, like I have this like magical connection to the internet that I'm carrying around with me all the time. And it's really easy to forget about all of the material infrastructure on which our digital stuff relies, right? Even more so than the trash example, right? Especially, you know, with the trash, if you sort of glance through the hedges at the right moment, you might actually witness a human being moving trash around, right? Like, or you might even hear the trucks coming sometimes, right? Whereas with digital stuff, it's very, very hidden from us, right? What I find most worrisome about that is that the thing that's hidden from us is what is in fact increasing exponentially. The sort of material basis of our digital lives is enormous. So I do this thing with students sometimes where you do like a trace route on, you know, you can go pull up your command line on your computer and just like trace an internet connection, right? So if I wanted to like look at how I get on the internet here and say log into my email at Vanderbilt, right? I can get a list of all of the sort of places that that goes through, right? And so like pretty much everything that goes to Vanderbilt, if I want to get on Vanderbilt EDU from here, it's going to go through Marietta, Georgia, even though that's well south of Vanderbilt, right? And you get this list of stuff, all of which is smashable stuff. This is what I like to think about, right? So rather than just thinking about like, I've got my computer and it shows me my email, and I know there's some server somewhere, but you know, there's like these two things and that's it. In fact, for that to totally break, there's a whole lot of different stuff I would have to smash. There's routers, right? If I'm in this room, I assume somewhere here there's got to be like a, it's hidden, wow. Okay, you guys are futuristic. But you know, somewhere you've got some kind of router or amplifier or something, right? And then there's like, somewhere certainly hidden, right? You're gonna have huge IT facilities on your campus through which everything is channeled and then sent, you know, to different places. And every single one of those things is smashable. And I like to think of it as smashable. You could take a hammer and crush it because that really emphasizes the materiality of it, right? Remembering that our digital experience is material. So I'm gonna bracket that thought. I'm gonna come back to that in a second. But first I'm gonna introduce the InfraVU project and show you guys how we're trying to use 360 video to help students think about infrastructure. So what we're doing is we want to make videos of, we have some, but we want to make videos of all kinds of different campus experiences. Everything from, you know, how does a library book get from the mysterious annex, right? I'm sure you guys have these on your campuses too, right? Like some books are at the library, but some books are somewhere else. And you know, order them and they show up the next day at the circulation desk or whatever, right? You know, that would be an example of one thing. We'd like to make 360 videos that take you through that experience. We'd like to make 360 videos that take you through when you throw your food into the thing in the dining hall that says, oh, everything you throw in here will be composted and it's magical. Like what actually happens to it and where does it go? We'd like to, this is the big ambitious thing that we're never actually going to accomplish, or not for several years anyway. We'd really like to do a whole water thing, right? Where like we're gonna start at the Cumberland River, figure out how your water gets out of your shower in your dorm, right? Follow the path all the way from the river, out your shower head, through the drain and back to the river. To really, you know, let students experience in virtual reality, you know, the material basis of all of these seemingly simple things. The easiest thing, though, we wanted to start with something manageable. So we started by simply tracing how power, IT stuff, steam, and water gets from the power station on Vanderbilt's campus to the Digital Humanities Center at Vanderbilt. So we have a series of 360 videos. This is still not totally finished, so I'm going to show you a clip from one. It's not actually publicly available yet, so don't go and try to find it. Hopefully it will be soon. But we have a series of 360 videos that begin at the power station where you're just in the center of this room and there's all these like big machines everywhere, right? Go through this awesome network of underground tunnels and bring you to the Digital Humanities Center. So I'll show you the tunnels because that's the funniest and coolest part. And this video needs like a lot of editing and fun stuff, but I'm hoping you're gonna get my favorite quote from it here. We're gonna follow this guy through the tunnel. It's a 360 video, right? You can look around. This is our cameraman, Adam, who you will hear speaking in a moment. That door that you see there takes you back into the actual power station. That's a door for humans, right? Unlike all this stuff, which is where, you know, water and electricity and steam, most importantly, actually, steam goes through, right? Because they use steam for the air conditioning and for the hot water and for a variety of other things on campus. Wow.
Wow. That's just hot. That's real hot.
Yeah, so that's our magic quote. It is really hot in here, but so you go through this tunnel, right? And it gets really dark and claustrophobic. You can, the whole time you can spin around. You can look down and discover, oh, it is a 360 video, and there's this weird little stitching flaw right here because that's where he's holding the camera. So hopefully you get the idea. So what we ultimately want to do is have students experience this whole journey, right? What I want to finish by mentioning, though, is what we're actually most interested in is the problems in this setup. And we've kind of started to realize that like the project we're trying to make is actually undermining what we're trying to do with it. And that has to do with this question of how digital technology is magical, right? When you take your phone and put it in your Google Cardboard and look at this and like, oh yeah, infrastructure, what I'm doing has weighty consequences. Actually, maybe that's the content of our video, but the form of the video is telling you something else entirely. The form of the video is telling you your life is magical, right? Like this VR experience seems to require nothing, right? Your phone doesn't even get very hot, right? Because the actual heat being produced by the experience is all being produced somewhere else and magically beamed to you. And so we're thinking of various ways to try to do something about that. My favorite, just because I think it's hilarious, is Google Cast Iron. I want to take cast iron skillets, hot glue them to the side of Google Cardboard and make people experience this this really painful, like I'm trying to hold this thing up and I'm gonna fall down eventually. We're probably not gonna do that. But I also want to at least mention Lisa Nakamura's wonderful keynote last night, which made me realize a whole other slew of problems that we haven't even started thinking about with sending students on this kind of experience. And we will be thinking about those in the future. So thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I went to grad school at Iowa, so it's a bit of a Midwestern homecoming. It's quite an interesting time to be here with the weather and the trees all changing. We don't have things like that in Los Angeles. So where is all this research and activism happening? Well, it's happening where culture has bestowed the research and activism, which is our universities. But if my Facebook feed is any indication, what people that work in universities are complaining about, it seems to be anything but the place that we should be investing our research and activism. Because when I take a spattering of these complaints about this profession we call professor, think about all of the things that you've complained about and may or may not be complained about you. You bring in a grant about a specific topic, you're going to upset the person on campus that works on that topic. We've all been on faculty committees where our fellow professors skip meetings or are as distracted as we complain about our students being in our classrooms. The labor practices, the resistance to neoliberalism, unwillingness to try out digital scholarship, telling their students to not try digital scholarship or interdisciplinary scholarship or even practice-based research because it will hurt their job chances. So the conclusion that I come to is if professors want to change, there would be change. You get a job, tenure track job, well, when I get tenure, then I'll change the system. Well, after that, it's your promotion to full professor. That's when I'll change the university for the better. Oh, well, now I got to go up for full professor. That's when I'll make it a better place for my mental health. And think about the ways that our culture and society looks at what we do. Well, really their only access point is what professors really like to be doing, which is writing books. So this is what not professors think about when they go up for things like tenure, and they may not be working on a book specifically. Why can't I put URLs in my tenure portfolio? Well, you can't put a URL in your tenure portfolio because the people that are reading your tenure portfolio don't want URLs in the tenure portfolio. Why can't I put my scholarship online? Why can't I work with that department? I've seen this happen to myself where, you shouldn't go for that grant because you'll upset the people in your department. Why printouts? I mean, we're working on environmental humanities. I think I can read the PDF. So I think what we need to do as a collective action is divest from the professor hegemony. Things aren't going to change unless we make them change, and if professors aren't making the change, then we need to make that change for the professors. And for professors, I might think, well, the system actually works really well. I beg to differ, just looking around at the state of the United States and the world and the $21 trillion debt that was left to my children and my children's children. So these are some of the things that so-called environmental humanities has produced. Routledge has a series. I'll just give you a sec to try to dissect these book titles that I copy and pasted from their website. There's only one thing that finds these titles interesting, and that's a tenure and promotion portfolio. Nobody's walking into bookstores wanting to buy Nature, Environment, and Poetry, Eco-Criticism and the Poetics of Seamus Haney and Teddy Hughes. And look at the domain specificity of these titles. We're supposed to be ecologists and environmentalists where we cross boundaries to come up with new ideas and change. And yet literature and ecofeminism, the literature's in there because the literature department would be upset if it wasn't. How can we do this? Well, we can say no. Whether you're a grad student or outside researcher or on the tenure track or an associate professor or a full professor or a provost, I actually think the higher up you are, the more you should be saying no. You'd be surprised what happens when you say no to the current practices. So this is a set of titles from the field that I call home, which is digital humanities, and thanks to Amanda, who's going to be speaking soon, the new field of eco-DH. These seem a lot more accessible to me, and if you think these things can't get you tenure, I beg to differ. Feminist in the Software Lab is by Tara McPherson at USC. She was just promoted to full professor in the cinema school. Public Secrets, Surfacing, these are projects by professors, and demanded that these projects go towards their tenure and promotion. Tenants in Action is a project I worked on when I was at USC with neighborhood residents that live in slum housing conditions, and had no support from my department whatsoever. From the top down, I was told that this wasn't interesting research for me to pursue. It's part of the reason I'm at Occidental now. So how did these projects occur? It's because people said yes. They said yes to joining a collaboration. I said yes to working in a university setting rather than Silicon Valley, taking my technical skills there. People said yes to including these things in their documentation, in their practice, in their research. So this is surfacing. This is the project I mentioned by Nicole Starozelski, who's at NYU now. And how did she say yes? Well, the university wasn't going to fund this project on undersea data cables and the effects that it has not only on the way we get our information, but also the built environment on the islands that these cables come up on. And how Fiji, for instance, doesn't really have access to the internet, even though most internet traffic goes through the island. She said yes to a grant by a company that lays undersea cables. So there's a little bit of give and take there. I doubt she's being critical of that company, per se, but it allowed this project to get done. Let's see, this is Exploding Tongues. This is my colleague at Occidental, Chris Gilman, the so-called flipped classroom. But rather than the usual notions of a flipped classroom where students are on the computers and we're learning that way, this class started with students writing small bits of text and combining them into longer texts and media. Scalar allows that kind of, I guess you'd call it horizontal authoring. This isn't so-called alt-ac, which is a term that was made up to describe us digital humanists. We're alternate. Well, when I look at these projects, this is a new digital edition supported by the NEH. This is alt-ac. This is the Tenants in Action project I mentioned. We actually produced an app so you could actually submit housing violations to the city. So it's also eco-critical. Anything we do that is engaging the environment, in this case, slum housing conditions, a lot of the organizations that are doing so-called digital work are really doing eco-critical work. And I'll end on this last slide here. This is a company co-owned by my good friend Adam Lizgowitz, who's just finishing his PhD at USC and is a game theorist studies person. He just got hired at Occidental. His company produced Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, which is the #1 VR game on Steam right now. And what do you do in the game? Well, you get guns and you shoot stuff. Why is this considered important enough or eco-critical enough or DH enough to put in my presentation? This seems like a horrible gun-related thing. Well, they're very liberal, and they decided if somebody's going to make the gun game, it should be them. And so because of that, they've instilled rules that will never change, like you cannot shoot animals or people or anything like that. So I think that's great kudos. And that interface with the people that like to shoot guns is actually quite amazing if you're on Reddit and you kind of see the conversations that they have. But perhaps most importantly to the crowd here, this actually formed part of the basis for his PhD dissertation. So there you go. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Max. I'm a PhD candidate at Duke in computational media arts and cultures. And today I want to talk about maintenance, which is the subject of my dissertation, and specifically about digital maintenance and how maintenance as a theme can work conceptually for thinking the eco-critical digital humanities. This also happens to be rather an accident of presentation, mostly about Google, but in spite of all the language of innovation, corporations are the most massive maintainers. By maintenance broadly, I refer to all the necessary, repetitive, and ongoing functions of all living organisms and complex systems devoted to the continuity, preservation, renewal, and the removal of waste. I start from the work of Muriel Lederman-Ugelis, who declared the discipline of maintenance art in her 1969 manifesto. I want to work towards a recentering of maintenance, bringing it back into the public eye, as Ugelis would say. After writing her manifesto, she developed a series of maintenance artworks documenting and performing her own domestic labor as art, as well as the labor and processes that go into maintaining institutions, buildings, infrastructures, and cultures. She worked as the artist in residence at the New York City Department of Sanitation for 4 decades. And
Oh, what happened? We lost him. Oh.
hello? Hey, are you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So.
Oh, great, okay.
Okay.
The blank screen is deliberate.
That's deliberate. So the first rule of maintenance is that it tends to hide. And you can think of the hidden abode of the unwaged housework in the domestic sphere, or maintenance workers that clean office buildings at night, or the fact that we can't see where the trash goes. We tend not to notice the smooth functioning of our tools until they break and the productive work is stopped to attend to them. What happens when the repair will no longer suffice and the thing must return to return the thing to its functional state? We often speak simply of throwing garbage out. I contend that on an aesthetic, functional, material level, the computational media are also excellent at hiding their maintenance work. That is, all of the energy, material, and labor that goes into maintaining digital networks, machines, and data. I'll start first with these buildings. These images were produced by Google, photographed by renowned architectural and documentary photographers. They are shots of the inside of some of the server farms, and you can find them on the Google-produced website called Where the Internet Lives. I want you to notice the ubiquity of single-point perspective and symmetry, which detaches the observer from the view and enframes it. The perspectival lines are the distant center of this convergence, and the perspective communicates a feeling of infinitude in the infrastructure. You get a sense that the racks could go on forever, and in a sense they do. Google is one of the world's largest producers of computer hardware, and they don't sell computers. Where the Internet Lives shows us, as one reviewer commented, that it literally is a series of tubes. It is clear that this space is just alive with flow, and the images are communicating a vision of what this machinic architecture is supposed to project: a ceaseless, unobstructed flow of all the invisible data and a sense for its near magical control of Google's infrastructures. The bright colors and lights stand in for the invisibility. It's in the mathematical regularity of the composition and the neat color coding and geometric arrangements of all the pipes and wires. On the subject of the invisible, what's hidden, and that's where we should always look for maintenance. So I'm interested mostly in what the images do not show. Firstly, the few dozen images now available on Google's data centers worldwide are largely bereft of people, which is fitting because people can't live in the cloud. It is also accurate. Data centers tend not to employ that many people, and they are staffed almost entirely by maintenance workers. So those are janitors, technicians, and security. And then there's this curious shot. It's the only close-up, it's one of the few close-up images, and one of the few images of equipment in any kind of disrepair, which its singularity should reinforce our sense that everything at Google is in working order. Google has drilled holes to these drives in order to destroy the user data they contain before disposing of them. What we don't see, however, and what the framing of these images seeks to detach them from, are the massive inputs and outputs of this global infrastructure and the legion of devices and businesses and personal machines that it connects. In 2014, nearly 42 tons of e-waste was generated worldwide. A quarter of this was produced in the United States. The projected figures for 2018 put this number closer to 50 million tons. And the US estimates that only 16% of this 2014 number, that is less than 7 tons, was recycled by states or sanctioned corporations. The rest was landfilled or incinerated, and very likely these processes were offshored from the highest producers of e-waste, which are the wealthiest nations. In the past years, nearly 80% of global e-waste has gone to Asia, a practice highly criticized by industry and environmental watchdogs, as much of it still gets recycled, though by some of the world's most economically disenfranchised populations and via DIY practices like burning away plastic to separate copper. This pollutes air and waterways in communities that have to handle this waste. The geographic displacement at one end from the consumers of these products in wealthy nations is mirrored by a radically toxic beginning of life cycle in terms of the mining and energy consumption that has to go into this. A mining industry rife with exploitative and unsafe labor practices is located largely offshore from the majority consumers of US electronic products. They're also a major consumptive force domestically. The US data centers consumed nearly 14 billion liters of water in 2014 and accounted for 2% of the total national energy consumption. There is still incentive for this industry to locate in centers where energy is cheap, dirty, and abundant. We have a lot of data centers here in North Carolina, and the majority of our energy comes from coal. These facts are largely invisibilized in the sleek, glossy devices that we work with daily, that we maintain and update the software on until they slow down too much or stop working. It is rare that processor, motherboard, and video card, hard drive, battery, and peripherals all fail together, but it is ever more the industry standard in consumer electronics that these pieces are soldered together and treated as one unit, making our devices less recoverable and more likely to become waste more quickly. I think attention to digital maintenance means a critical awareness of and attendance to these material facts about the complex web of social and environmental relations around our devices and the power and politics embedded in them. This brings me to another site of the toxic, and perhaps one more at home with the usual material of Humanities, which is public discourse. This is a screenshot of the website for Google's new Perspective API, part of a suite of projects that Google has been developing under the Jigsaw platform, with a stated intention of making online activity safer from a whole host of dangers, from online harassment to terrorist activity. Perspective uses Google-developed neural network models to evaluate submitted text in terms of its possible offensiveness or abusiveness and return a toxicity score in the form of a percentage. The intended use for a process like this, according to the project's developers, would be a sort of user check or pre-screener rather than a censorship device, but is supposed to provide commenters with feedback so they can evaluate their own speech before they post. I find the language of toxicity particularly interesting in relation to the maintenance processes that may be at work in moderating online discourse. I want to suggest the work of content moderation as well. We often find maintenance in hiding, from all the invisibilized algorithmic and human work that goes into moderating Facebook feeds, to the black boxing of the algorithmic processes in machine learning and neural nets, which take incomprehensibly complex or massive amounts of data at one end, and feedback evaluations or decisions in the other. Early users of the Perspective API were quick to point out that it seemed to have some issues, particularly in evaluating statements that contain words explicitly referencing race, gender, or sexual orientation. I find it particularly striking in librarian and blogger Jessamine West's experiments that she chose to input the most basic enunciation of being, I am. Google has been encouraging of public feedback on this front and tweaking the models on which these rankings are based in response to user feedback. If you put in these phrases now, you get very different results. But the racist, sexist, bigoted algorithm problem has popped up in numerous applications of machine learning to language, and I think it might be useful to frame this as a maintenance problem. It brings us to the center of politics and ethics around maintenance and reminds us of how maintenance can also be a form of control. How do the supposedly neutral machinic processes maintain patterns of discrimination embedded at the level of discourse? To carry on with this metaphor of the toxic, there's the corpus problem. It's a problem with garbage in and garbage out. This is a huge issue across applications of machine learning, from targeted advertising to criminal recidivism predictors, and like maintenance, these processes come in both discursive and material forms. Machine learning language corpora are most often composed from publicly available and open source data sets. Many of these are acquired through web scraping or news databases. It is a question of quantity and availability rather than quality. Often, as the case with Perspective, the data are ranked or parsed by humans and this information is fed into the model. But it should come as no surprise to the humanists that these models reproduce ideological and discriminatory biases. We are trained in reading text and speech and images for what they communicate beyond the literal, at the level of context and form. We know knowledge and discourse as sites of reproduction, and cultural reproduction is our domain. We're just not so used to these processes being entirely black boxed. So I leave you with some questions as fellow digitally interested, digitally enabled humanists. What work can we do as expert historians, cultural analysts, and readers of text to help shed critical light on the problem when maintenance goes wrong in these ways? And how can we be better, more conscious maintainers? Thank you.
Similarly to Max, my research began with digital materiality. I was troubled by the ungrounded nature of digital theory and wanted to root the immaterial concepts we use, those that erase the physical stuff of the digital by equating digital technology with computation, algorithms, and affect, into the earthly and fleshy context from which it comes and to which it returns. Digital metabolism was my solution. Thinking ecosystemically, not about media ecologies as machines working in tandem like Matthew Fuller does in his book Media Ecologies, but about the interconnections between humans, our digital technologies, and their environmental entanglements, helps reveal the metabolic relations between them. Metabolic thinking links bodies, technological and otherwise, to the earth. Metabolic thinking ties our technosphere to its rare earth mineral beginnings and its accumulating toxic wastes. It reminds us that our digital humanities are built on tools that have physical beginnings and ends. It reminds us that DH is dirty. If the digital humanities are so dirty, then eco-critical DH gives us a way to react. As public, global, accessible work, the eco-critical digital humanities can translate human environmental issues into digital interventions that can meaningfully cultivate change through outreach, participation, education, and organization. Eco-critical DH can thoughtfully tend to the urgent humanities question of how we might live in digitally enhanced, environmentally depleted Anthropocene habitats. Eco-DH is self-reflexive while performing its work. It is aware of its ecological footprint and acknowledges its role in environmental, anthropogenic, technogenic destruction. Eco-critical digital work pivots from traditional eco-criticism by focusing on the material effects of our digital tools and texts, and by documenting and sharing real environmental issues. It is a digital skill and structure for exploring and publicizing the inhuman and inhumane aspects of our increasingly severe environmental issues. Though the field is small, there are admirable eco-critical digital projects coming out of universities and research centers around the world, including, of course, most certainly those of my colleagues on this panel. Eco-critical digital work comes in the form of digital archives, digital activism, digital data, and digitally based research projects. The Critical Data Saving Post-Obama North American Data Refuge Project has humanists rallying to archive and tell data stories about critical climate and environmental data from United States government websites. Projects like Climate Stories NC, 100 Views of Climate Change, Everyday Climate Change, and Postcards from Climate Change capture climate stories from people across the globe. Carl Sachs' No DAPL map plots indigenous cultural areas alongside government geographical areas and oil pipeline sites, thus humanizing the humanless map oil companies use to plot their pipelines. Researchers at the University of British Columbia and Yale, among many others, including here at Duke, have developed augmented reality projects that educate and compel users to initiate more sustainable behaviors. Mark Sample's Shark Girls turns a pair of location pinging O-search sharks, Mary Lee and Catherine, into literary swimmers. And Jennifer Gabri's Citizen Sense work, humans become digital sensors, using their smartphones and or small DIY electronics to record, access, and engage environmental data. In so doing, they gain access to a sixth sense, we might say, one digitally mediated by technological devices that moves environmental data from an abstract and often unseen concept to a concrete experience of embodiment. Projects like Soil Selfies and Future Coasts combine the mediated digitality of Mark Sample's sharks with the human involvement of Gabri's Citizen Sense science work to create wholly new experiences of human-nature relation. Other eco-critical DH projects digitize and archive historical environmental media, map the overlaps between poverty and pollution, provide public updates on air and water quality, illustrate the relationship between environmental and human health, and elicit public participation in local pro-environmental activities. This work can also very easily be brought to the classroom. In my Duke Designing Nature's Futures course, my students are digitally mapping climate solutions, or using digital social media to engage in global eco-activism, and are thinking more broadly about reducing their digital footprint. In my environmental activism class, my students are working to map environmental movements, environmental actions, and environmental activist groups across the US. They are also using digital tools to enact protest actions here on campus. Eco-critical digital projects reconfigure our perceived contingencies. They re-narrate through digital tools and hands-on practice the stories we tell about humans, nature, and technology. Eco-critical digital work recognizes our technospheric condition and disturbs it positively by reconfiguring the problem, wasteful carbon-heavy digital use, into its solution, using digital tools for education, outreach, participation, and cultivation of new flows of behaviors within the ecosystem. The point is not to advocate we rid ourselves of technology. After all, man is both ecological and technological, as Claire Coldwell reminds us, but to add a layer of metabolic awareness to our technology use and theory, and to use our technologies to reflect on our environmental entanglements. Eco-critical DH gives us a spongier digital material humanities, one that absorbs the full force of our interconnections and leads us towards knowledge production tailored to the concerns of our emerging Anthropocenic humanities. I think I forgot to use my slides. Sorry, they were at the end.
So I'm Libby Rose Striegl, and I'm an artist and digital researcher, practice-based researcher, whatever you want to call it. I work on a variety of projects, and I'm going to go through a few of them with you. So I've evolved over the years a sort of multi-valent art practice that started with a lot of traditional object-based works, digital video projects, film-based projects, sculptural projects, and I've moved into a practice that involves a lot of subversion, intervention workshops, social and collaborative practice. And so I'm going to start with some of the earlier stuff and move into the newer stuff. A lot of this came out of work as a technologist while I was an MFA student at Duke, and has kind of continued throughout my evolution into my PhD practice. So the basis of all of my work is in this sort of overarching theme of convenience, which is pretty strongly related to Max's theme of maintenance. I do a lot of work around surfacing and critiquing the invisible, complicating assumptions about just about everything, and reframing our dialogue about our digital selves. So this is an earlier project that was kind of the basis for a lot of where I've moved to. I started this sculptural project where I was looking at the Beaufort Channel, which is off of an island in North Carolina, where I was looking at bathymetric data that I scraped and analyzed from some source that was provided to me from a variety of places, surveyed a lot of the historical practices around the channel, and this is a channel that's regularly dredged in order to maintain a shipping lane. And then through digital and traditional fabrication, including CNC milling and mold casting, I took that data and created a sculptural project that's meant to illustrate a couple of things about the sort of environment of that channel, which is something that no one really has the ability to see without surfacing it. So this is a model of the channel that's been reversed or inverted so that over time you can sort of see the continual degradation of what would be the channel bottom kind of needing to be continually dredged out. So that was an early project that I worked on. It led into sort of more interest in this use of database projects, where I was thinking about surveying the existing digital humanities projects around a lot of things, and then creating interventions that I could deploy in a variety of ways. I moved into making this smart device ingredient label project where I was surveying the existing information about the components of our smart devices, turning them into what is a really recognizable form, printing these as stickers, but also creating an online platform where you could sort of pull apart a phone and look at the materials inside of it. And then I did a sort of sticker bombing campaign where I was putting these on the backs of, this is the component labels for, or component label for an iPhone 4. So I was putting them on the backs of actual phones in Apple stores, but also distributing them pretty widely. Excuse me, I'm a little sick. The project that I've moved to or the projects that I've moved to as I moved to Colorado have gone further into the examination of our sort of digital lives and the materiality behind them. I worked with a collaborator on a project where we were building digital kits and creating a platform to distribute sneakernet devices. We were building a sort of framework for secure storage of data, and then talking about the ways that we can transmit data that don't involve this like massive internet infrastructure, and what the sort of complications of thinking about that were. This is the sort of centerfold from the zine that I worked on around that. But this was a way of engaging with the materiality of the internet and talking about the conveniences that are afforded by it, but also the complications that we have created in our lives by using it, and also the sort of ecological impact of the internet as a mass, and the sort of necessity to consider that background information anytime you're engaging in work that's digital. This is a sort of, it's a way of engaging with students that's a little bit more familiar and on their level. And it's been used in a number of workshops that I've conducted since. So I do work at the Media Archaeology Lab in Boulder, which is the clearinghouse for the sort of history of technology. We have devices spanning from the late 19th century to the present day, all of which are functional, and it's a way of illustrating the material past of our technological lives. And through that practice, I've started moving into these sort of workshop-based and pedagogical practice efforts around materiality, repair, convenience, and all of our interactions with tech on a daily basis. I conduct a series called Take It Aparties, where, similar to Ted's reference to smashing things, most people don't look inside their devices, and I use this as an opportunity to sort of tell students how they can get into their device and what they can do with it. And out of the Take It Aparties, I also do a lot of Fix-It clinics. I worked last semester with a colleague on a plastic machines class, which was a class in which we empowered undergrad students to build the machines from the Precious Plastics Project, which is a massive non-university based digital humanities project. The huge forum, a lot of documentation around building plastic recycling machines that can be sort of hyper-localized. So those are some of the practices that I've been engaging in over the last few years that are sort of related to this digital humanities, these digital humanities tools, and sort of taking them into the art world, into my own practice, and bringing them back to life in a sort of one-on-one or workshop-based environment. The project that I'm working on now is one that I'm calling Voluntary De-Convenience, and taglining it as a performative behavioral research and modification project. We'll have a sort of large web-based component, but the basis of this project is a really simple premise, and that is, what would it take for you to trade me your smartphone for a flip phone? I am bribing people, which is not great research practice, but it's really fun art practice, to trade me their smartphones for a period of time in exchange for a flip phone that I'm helping them to enable in all of the necessary ways, converting their contacts over, starting it up with their cellular service, holding the smartphone in a safe, and at the end of a contract that we've written up, rewarding them with some sort of bribe, whatever that was that we agreed upon. So I'm using this as an avenue to talk about a lot of different things around convenience, but also a lot of different things around the both psychological and ecological impact of continual data use. So this is sort of good overview of my practice, and I'm going to try and get back to not screen sharing. So I'm going to end it there, but thank you all for having us.